A boy with burned hands warns a family about a gas leak, and 24 hours later, luxury cars arrive with an unbelievable surprise. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Marcus Johnson's bandaged hands throbbed as he sniffed the unmistakable odor of natural gas seeping through the immaculate streets of Oakwood Hills. The sharp, rotten egg smell cut through the crisp autumn air, triggering an immediate response in his 12-year-old body. His heart rate accelerated, palms dampened beneath their gauze wrappings, and his breath quickened to shallow gasps. For a boy who had lost everything in a gas explosion just 3 weeks ago, the smell was an instant traumatic trigger. Each inhalation brought flashes of that night. The sudden roar, the blinding light, his parents' final screams. The temporary shelter where he now slept was only a 15-minute walk from this neighborhood of luxury homes, yet it existed in an entirely different world from his own. Standing before the Victorian mansion on the corner, Marcus knew he needed to act, even though his dirty bandages and dark skin made him an unwelcome stranger in this exclusive neighborhood. The smell grew stronger as he approached the 3-story Peterson residence with its perfectly manicured garden. Each step up the cobblestone path felt like walking into enemy territory, the weight of potential rejection heavy on his shoulders. Marcus paused at the bottom of the porch steps, his resolve wavering. What if they didn't believe him? What if they called security before he could explain? His gaze traveled up the imposing facade, taking in the ornate trim and gleaming windows that reflected the late afternoon sun. After hesitating for several minutes, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, he finally gathered his courage. The throbbing pain in his hands served as a grim reminder of what happened when warnings went unheeded. With newfound determination, Marcus climbed the steps and approached the imposing oak door. He couldn't risk touching the brass knocker with his sensitive fingers, so he awkwardly pressed the doorbell with his elbow, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing skin. The melodic chime echoed inside the house, followed by approaching footsteps. Marcus swallowed hard, rehearsing his warning in his mind. The door swung open to reveal an elegant black woman in her early 40s, wearing a casual but expensive-looking sweater and slacks. Aisha Peterson's eyes immediately moved from Marcus's face to his bandaged hands, then back up, her expression shifting from polite inquiry to undisguised suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cautious as she maintained a firm grip on the edge of the door, ready to close it if necessary. "Ma'am?" Marcus began, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I smelled gas coming from your house. It's dangerous. There might be a leak." Aisha's eyebrows rose as she glanced over her shoulder into the house. "Gas? I don't smell anything." "It's coming from outside, probably from the line leading to your house." Marcus persisted, the words tumbling out faster now. "I know what it smells like. Please, you need to call the gas company right away." Doubt clouded Aisha's features as she studied the boy more carefully, taking in his worn clothes, the dirty bandages, his anxious expression. "How did you get into this neighborhood? Where do you live?" Before Marcus could answer, a tall man appeared behind Aisha. David Peterson placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder, his curious gaze moving from her tense posture to the boy on their doorstep. "What's going on?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a note of concern rather than suspicion. "This boy says he smells gas," Aisha explained, her voice conveying her skepticism. David stepped forward, moving partially around his wife. Unlike her, he immediately sniffed the air, his forehead creasing with concentration. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Johnson, sir. I'm staying at the Westview Youth Shelter. I was walking by when I noticed the smell." He held up his bandaged hands slightly. "I know what gas leaks can do." The mention of the shelter didn't escape either adult's notice. David's expression softened, while Aisha's became more guarded. From the staircase behind them, Two small figures appeared, identical twins with caramel-colored skin and curious eyes, a boy and a girl about 10 years old. "Dad, who is it?" the girl called out, trying to peer around her parents. "Just someone helping us check something, Zoe," David answered. "You and Zach stay upstairs for now." The twins lingered on the stairs, whispering to each other and stealing glances at Marcus. Their presence made him even more aware of the danger. If this house exploded like his had, these children would suffer the same fate he narrowly escaped. "Sir, please," Marcus urged, his voice more desperate now. "The smell is strongest near your gas meter on the side of the house. Someone needs to check it." David seemed about to respond when a sharp voice cut through the air from behind Marcus. "Is there a problem here, David?" Marcus turned to see an older white man with silver hair standing at the edge of the Petersons' lawn, arms crossed over his chest. Mr. Whitmore, as Marcus would soon learn, wore an expression of open distrust as he glared at the boy. "No problem, Richard," David replied evenly. "This young man is just concerned about a potential gas leak." Whitmore scoffed. "Is that what he told you? These kids from the shelter are always wandering through nice neighborhoods looking for handouts or worse." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "I caught one trying to break into my garage last month." Marcus felt his face burn with shame and anger. "I'm not looking for anything," he protested. "I'm trying to help." "Sure you are," Whitmore retorted, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling neighborhood security. This has gone on long enough. These shelter kids thinking they can just roam around Oakwood Hills." Panic rose in Marcus's chest. If security came, they'd never listen to him about the gas leak. They'd just escort him out or worse, call the police. "Please," Marcus said, his voice cracking with desperation. "Just check for yourselves. Call the gas company. If I'm wrong, I'll leave and never come back." David studied Marcus for a long moment before nodding. "I'll check the meter." "David," Whitmore called out, "you're encouraging this behavior?" "I'm just being cautious, Richard," David replied firmly as he stepped onto the porch. "If there's even a small chance he's right." "You can smell it if you stand near the foundation on that side," Marcus interrupted, pointing with his elbow to avoid moving his fingers. "It's strongest there." David nodded and walked around the side of the house. Aisha remained in the doorway, her expression softening slightly as she noticed how Marcus winced when he shifted his weight. "What happened to your hands?" she asked, her professional medical curiosity momentarily overriding her suspicion. "Gas explosion," Marcus answered quietly. "My house 3 weeks ago. That's why I'm at the shelter now." Before Aisha could respond, David returned, his face noticeably paler. "I definitely smell something by the meter." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the gas company." Whitmore's expression shifted from anger to concern. "Are you serious?" "Very," David replied curtly as he dialed. "They said they'll send someone immediately." The next 20 minutes passed in tense waiting. David invited Marcus to sit on the porch swing while they waited, despite Whitmore's continued glares from his position by the sidewalk. When the gas company van finally pulled up, 2 technicians quickly approached the house, equipment in hand. After a thorough inspection, the lead technician approached David with a grave expression. "You were right to call us, sir. There's a significant leak in the line connecting to your meter. It looks like the pipe has corroded in an unusual pattern." He glanced at Marcus. "If it had gone undetected much longer, gas would have built up under your house. You might not have woken up tomorrow." Aisha gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. She turned to look at Marcus with new eyes. "You saved our lives." David nodded solemnly. "We owe you our thanks, Marcus." He extended his hand but quickly withdrew it when he remembered the boy's injuries. "Is there anything we can do for you?" Before Marcus could answer, Aisha disappeared into the house, returning moments later with a glass of water. "Here," she said gently. "You must be thirsty." Marcus accepted the glass awkwardly, his bandaged fingers struggling to maintain a grip. He took a small sip, savoring the cool water, the first kindness he'd experienced in weeks. The peaceful moment shattered as the wail of police sirens cut through the air. Blue and red lights flashed at the end of the street, growing brighter as a patrol car sped toward the Peterson house. "I didn't do anything," Marcus said immediately, rising to his feet, the glass of water trembling in his unsteady grasp. Whitmore stepped forward, a smug expression on his face. "I called them before the gas company arrived. Can't be too careful these days." Two officers exited the patrol car and strode purposefully up the walk. Before David could explain the situation, the officers zeroed in on Marcus. "Is this the individual causing the disturbance?" the taller officer asked, his hand resting casually on his belt. "There's no disturbance," David began. "This young man—" "We received a report of a suspicious person trespassing and harassing residents," the officer interrupted, reaching for Marcus's arm. "Wait," Marcus cried out. "I was just telling them about the gas leak." The officers ignored his explanation, each grabbing one of his arms. Marcus screamed in agony as their firm grip pressed against his still-healing burns beneath the bandages. His eyes, wide with pain and fear, locked with David Peterson's while being dragged toward the police car, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "Please, don't let them take me back there." The police cruiser's door slammed shut, muffling Marcus's desperate cries as David Peterson stood frozen on his front steps. The boy's pleading eyes haunted him as the vehicle pulled away, red and blue lights flashing against the manicured hedges of Oakwood Hills. "You can't just let them take him like that," Aisha said, gripping her husband's arm. "That child saved our lives." David nodded grimly. "Get the car keys. I'll call Thomas." Inside the cramped interrogation room at the Oakwood Hills police station, Marcus Johnson sat hunched beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. His bandaged hands lay palms up on the metal table, the once white gauze now spotted with fresh blood where the officer's rough handling had reopened his wounds. A middle-aged detective with deep creases around his eyes loomed over him, his badge catching the light each time he leaned forward. "So you just happened to be wandering through the richest neighborhood in the county and decided to play hero?" The detective's voice dripped with skepticism. "What were you really doing there, Marcus?" "I told you," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I smelled gas. I was just trying to help." The detective sighed dramatically. "Look, we know about your situation. Fire at your home, parents gone, staying at Westview. Must be tough going from that to sleeping on a shelter cot. I get why you might be looking for opportunities in a place like Oakwood Hills." Marcus flinched at the casual mention of his parents, his eyes filling with tears he refused to let fall. "I wasn't stealing. I wasn't doing anything wrong." In the station's reception area, David and Aisha Peterson stood at the front desk, their faces tight with controlled anger as they faced the desk sergeant. "We want to see Marcus Johnson immediately," David demanded, his lawyer's articulation precise and deliberate. "That boy is a hero, not a criminal. He saved our family from a potential gas explosion, and your officers injured him during an unnecessary arrest." The sergeant barely looked up from his computer. "Sir, we're processing a minor without guardian supervision. There are protocols." "I'm a pediatric surgeon at Mercy General," Aisha interrupted, her professional tone brooking no argument. "That child has severe burn injuries that need proper care. Your officers aggravated those injuries during detainment, and I need to assess the damage." As if to emphasize her point, a muffled cry of pain echoed from down the hallway. Aisha's head snapped toward the sound, her medical instincts immediately triggered. "That's him," she said, her voice rising. "His bandages need changing. Those burns are susceptible to infection." The sergeant's expression remained impassive. "Ma'am, we've called the on-duty paramedic. He'll be here shortly." "A paramedic isn't sufficient for third-degree burns," Aisha replied, barely containing her frustration. Those bandages need sterile changing by someone experienced with burn treatment. While they argued, Marcus sat in the interrogation room, watching with growing horror as blood seeped through his bandages. Each small movement sent waves of fire through his hands. The detective had stepped out momentarily, leaving Marcus alone with his pain and the fragmented memories that kept surfacing since the police car door had closed. The explosion 3 weeks ago played in his mind. The sudden pressure change that popped his ears, the blinding flash that turned night to day for one terrible second, the heat that seemed to melt the skin from his bones. He remembered crawling through debris, calling for his parents, finding his father's body shielding what would have been his mother's position at the kitchen table, except there was nothing recognizable left of her. The door opened, startling Marcus back to the present. A different officer entered, younger, with a clipboard in hand. "We're trying to reach someone from Westview Shelter to verify your residence status," the officer said without preamble. "The social worker assigned to your case is apparently out of town. Do you have any other emergency contacts?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, sir. Just Ms. Winters from the shelter, but she's at a conference until Monday." The officer made a note, his eyes briefly lingering on Marcus's bloodied bandages. Something like concern flickered across his face before his professional mask returned. "We'll keep trying. In the meantime, a paramedic should be here soon to look at your hands." Back at the Peterson residence, the twins Zoe and Zach sat huddled at the top of the stairs, eavesdropping on the conversation between their Uncle Thomas, who had arrived minutes after their parents left for the police station, and the gas company technician who had remained to complete repairs. "So it wasn't just normal corrosion?" Thomas asked, his voice carrying up the stairwell. "Never seen anything like it," the technician replied. "The pattern of degradation suggests some kind of accelerant was applied to the pipe. Almost looks deliberate, if you ask me." Zoe turned to her brother, eyes wide. "Someone tried to hurt us?" Zach nodded solemnly. "That boy knew. He saved us." Meanwhile, at the police station, David's cell phone rang. He stepped away from the front desk to answer it, his expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "That was the gas technician," he told Aisha when he returned. "He thinks someone tampered with our gas line. This wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately damaged the pipe." Aisha's hand flew to her mouth. "Who would do such a thing?" Before David could respond, the station doors swung open, and Thomas Reynolds strode in. Aisha's brother carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention in courtrooms across the state. His tailored suit and purposeful stride caused several officers to look up from their desks. "Where's the boy?" Thomas asked without preamble. "They won't let us see him," David explained quickly. "They're waiting for someone from the shelter to confirm his identity, but his social worker is out of town." Thomas nodded once, his jaw setting firmly. "Wait here." He approached the desk sergeant with the assured manner of someone who knew exactly how the system worked and how to work it. "I'm Thomas Reynolds, attorney at law. I'm here representing Marcus Johnson, the minor currently being held without proper guardian notification or medical treatment. I need to see him immediately." While Thomas engaged with increasingly higher-ranking officers, Marcus sat alone in the interrogation room, fighting back tears as he stared at his bandaged hands. The gauze was now soaked through in several places, the pain radiating up his arms in pulsing waves. Each throb brought another flash of memory. His father's engineering book spread across the dining table, his mother's careful notes on chemical compounds, their whispered conversations that would stop whenever he entered the room. The door opened again, this time revealing both the young officer and a paramedic carrying a medical bag. "Let's take a look at those hands," the paramedic said, setting his bag on the table and pulling out fresh gauze and antiseptic. Marcus slowly extended his arms, wincing as the paramedic began to unwrap the soiled bandages. As the layers came away, revealing the angry red flesh beneath. The young officer visibly paled and looked away. "These need proper medical attention, not just a quick wrap job," the paramedic muttered, gently cleaning around the worst of the burns. "How long ago did this happen?" 3 weeks, Marcus replied through gritted teeth. "The hospital said I needed special care. But after I went to the shelter..." He trailed off, not wanting to complain about the overworked staff at Westview who did their best with limited resources. In the station's main area, the confrontation was escalating. Thomas had managed to get the station captain involved, but progress was still stalled on bureaucratic technicalities. "This is absurd," Thomas argued, his voice carrying through the building. "He's a minor with serious injuries who performed a public service. He should be receiving medical care, not sitting in an interrogation room." The captain held up placating hands. "Mr. Reynolds, I understand your concern, but without verification of his guardian status..." Thomas cut him off. "Let me be clear. If anything happens to that boy while he's in your custody, the lawsuit will make headline news across the state." During this heated exchange, a rookie officer approached the captain, whispering something that caused his expression to change dramatically. "What fire?" the captain asked loudly, drawing everyone's attention. The rookie officer cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, we just got word that there was a fire at Westview Youth Shelter about an hour ago. No casualties, but the administrative office was completely destroyed, including all resident records." A stunned silence fell over the room. Aisha and David exchanged alarmed glances as Thomas's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What are the chances?" Thomas muttered, turning back to the captain. "First, a deliberately damaged gas line at my sister's house, now a convenient fire that destroys this boy's records." The captain seemed genuinely disturbed by this development. "Let me make some calls." While the adults navigated the bureaucratic maze, Marcus had his bandages changed by the paramedic, who worked as gently as possible but still couldn't prevent the occasional gasp of pain from the boy. With each wave of agony, Marcus's mind flashed to another memory. His parents' hushed argument the week before the explosion, his father hiding something inside Marcus's favorite stuffed animal, his mother's tearful embrace the last morning before she left for work, whispering, "Remember what we taught you. Trust your instincts." The interrogation room door suddenly burst open, revealing Thomas Reynolds with the police captain behind him. Marcus looked up, startled, as Thomas approached and knelt beside his chair. "Marcus, I'm Thomas Reynolds, Aisha Peterson's brother. I'm an attorney and I'm here to help you." His voice was gentle but firm. "We're going to get you out of here." The paramedic had just secured the last of the fresh bandages. "These are temporary at best. He needs to see a specialist." Thomas nodded grimly before turning back to Marcus. "Can you walk? The Petersons are waiting outside." As Marcus stood shakily, an officer passing by the open door did a double take, staring at the boy with sudden recognition. "Hey, wait a minute," the officer said, stepping into the room. "I know this kid. He was at the station last week, looking at the bulletin board. I remember because of the bandages." Marcus nodded hesitantly. "I was waiting for Ms. Winters while she filed some paperwork." "Did you see something on that board?" Thomas asked quietly. Marcus swallowed hard before answering. "The man with the beard in the bottom corner. I've seen him before. He was walking around Oakwood Hills a few days ago looking at houses, including the Petersons." Thomas and the captain exchanged significant looks before escorting Marcus toward the exit. As they approached the reception area, where David and Aisha waited anxiously, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A disheveled officer burst through the doors, his uniform smudged with soot. "Captain, you're needed at Westview Shelter right away. The fire investigator found something. Looks like arson, specifically targeted at the records room. And there's more. Every digital backup was wiped from their server." When the Petersons finally managed to secure Marcus's release, they discovered a devastating revelation. The fire at the shelter had systematically destroyed all of his records and documentation, as if someone wanted to erase every trace of his existence. The Petersons' SUV moved silently through the night, its headlights cutting through the darkness as David drove them away from the police station. In the back seat, Marcus sat hunched between Zoe and Zach, his newly bandaged hands resting palms up on his lap. The twins had refused to go to bed until their parents returned, and now they watched the newcomer with undisguised curiosity. "Are you really going to stay with us?" Zoe whispered, her eyes wide in the dim light. Marcus looked up, uncertainty written across his features. "I don't know. I don't have anywhere else to go right now." The destruction of Westview Shelter's records had thrown everything into chaos. With no documentation of his identity and no social worker available to verify his status, Marcus had fallen into a bureaucratic void. It was only through Thomas's legal maneuvering and the Petersons' insistence that he hadn't been sent to an emergency state facility for the weekend. "You're staying with us until we figure this out," Aisha said firmly from the front seat, turning to look at him. "That's not negotiable." David nodded in agreement, meeting Marcus's eyes in the rearview mirror. "You saved our family, Marcus. We won't forget that." As they turned onto the tree-lined street of Oakwood Hills, Marcus tensed visibly. The elegant homes with their manicured lawns and security systems represented a world entirely foreign to him, a world where he didn't belong. His anxiety only increased when they pulled into the Petersons' driveway, and he saw lights still on in Mr. Whitmore's house across the street. "Don't worry about him," David said, noticing Marcus's gaze. "Thomas is filing a complaint about his false report to the police." Inside the house, Aisha led Marcus to the guest bedroom on the first floor. "I thought this might be easier for you. No stairs to navigate with your hands." The room was larger than any bedroom Marcus had ever had, with a queen-sized bed covered in plush bedding, an antique dresser, and wide windows overlooking the garden. The attached bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome fixtures. The opulence overwhelmed him. "Thank you," he managed, his voice small. "This is a lot." Aisha's expression softened as she set down fresh pajamas on the bed. "These are David's, so they'll be huge on you, but they're soft and clean. Do you need help changing your clothes?" Marcus shook his head quickly, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I can manage." After Aisha left, Marcus struggled painfully to change into the borrowed pajamas, the silk fabric sliding against his bandages. When he finally settled into the impossibly soft bed, exhaustion overtook him immediately, dragging him into a restless sleep, filled with fractured images of fire and screaming. In the kitchen upstairs, Aisha and David spoke in hushed tones with Thomas, who had followed them home. "The gas technician confirmed it," David said, sliding a report across the table. "Someone deliberately weakened that pipe. It's not normal corrosion." Thomas examined the document, his expression grim. "And now a fire conveniently destroys all records of a boy who witnessed something suspicious in your neighborhood." He looked up at his sister. "This isn't coincidence, Aisha. Who would target us? And why?" Aisha's hand trembled slightly as she brought her tea to her lips. "We're just a normal family." David placed his hand over hers, steadying it. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." The tension in the room was broken by the ping of a text message arriving on David's phone. He glanced at the screen, his face draining of color. Wordlessly, he turned the phone so the others could read the message. "Return the boy to where he belongs or your family will pay 24 hours. "That's it," Thomas said, pulling out his own phone. "I'm calling in security." "The police," Aisha began. "The police didn't believe Marcus about the gas leak, and they treated him like a criminal," Thomas interrupted. "I'm calling in private security. People I trust." While the adults formulated a plan, Zoe and Zach whispered together in their shared bedroom. "I'm going to show him my rock collection tomorrow," Zoe decided, arranging colorful minerals on her bedside table. "He might like the pyrite. It looks like gold." "He saved us," Zach said solemnly, staring at the ceiling. "Dad said if the gas had kept leaking, we could have died in our sleep." "I don't care what Mr. Whitmore said about shelter kids," Zoe declared firmly. "Marcus is a hero." In the early hours of the morning, Marcus awoke screaming, the nightmare of the explosion fresh in his mind. Aisha was at his side within moments, her hand cool against his forehead. "You're safe," she murmured, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're at our house, remember? You're safe here." Marcus nodded shakily, wincing as pain shot through his hands. The bandages felt tight and hot against his skin. "They're worse this morning," Aisha observed, carefully examining the bandages without touching them. "We need to get you to a specialist." Later that morning, Dr. Elena Rivera arrived at the Peterson home. A colleague of Aisha's from Mercy General Hospital, she specialized in pediatric burn treatment and had agreed to make a house call as a personal favor. In the guest bedroom, Dr. Rivera unwrapped Marcus's bandages with expert care, her expression growing more concerned as each layer revealed the damaged tissue beneath. "How did the hospital treat these initially?" she asked, examining the angry red flesh. "I don't remember much," Marcus admitted. "I was in shock. They kept me for 3 days, then transferred me to Westview when they couldn't locate any relatives." Dr. Rivera shook her head slightly. "These burns are 3rd degree in several places. Without proper follow-up care and possibly skin grafts, you could lose mobility in your fingers permanently." Marcus stared at his exposed hands, the skin mottled and shiny in places, blackened in others. "Will I be able to use them again?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "With the right treatment, yes," Dr. Rivera assured him. "But we need to act quickly. The window for optimal intervention is closing." In the dining room, Thomas spread photographs across the table, surveillance images from the security cameras he had installed at Aisha and David's house years earlier as a housewarming gift. "Look at these," he said, pointing to several figures captured at odd angles. "These were taken over the past week. People watching your house, taking pictures." David examined the grainy images. "Who are they?" "I'm working on that," Thomas replied. "But it confirms that whatever's happening isn't random. Your family is being targeted." Zach burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, I found something. Our security camera caught Mr. Whitmore taking pictures of our house at, 6 this morning." Sure enough, the footage showed their neighbor skulking near the hedges that separated their properties, his phone raised toward the Petersons' windows. But it was what happened next that chilled them. Whitmore approached a black sedan, parked down the street, and handed something to the driver before the car drove away. "He's reporting to someone," Thomas said grimly. "Your friendly neighborhood spy." The discovery triggered a thorough sweep of the house. David found a small listening device beneath the kitchen table, its presence explaining how the anonymous texter knew about Marcus. "They've been monitoring us," Aisha whispered, horror dawning on her face. "But why? What could they possibly want with Marcus?" As if in answer to her question, the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. David answered cautiously, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Peterson," a digitally altered voice stated, "your family was not the target until you took in the Johnson boy. Return him to the system, and this ends." "Who is this?" David demanded. "What do you want with him?" "He belongs to us," the voice replied simply before the line went dead. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, having heard everything. His face had gone ashen. "I should go," he whispered. "I'm putting you all in danger." "Absolutely not," Aisha said firmly, crossing to him and gently guiding him to a chair. "Nobody is taking you anywhere." "But they're threatening your family because of me," Marcus protested weakly. "Listen to me," David knelt before him, careful not to touch his injured hands. "Whoever these people are, they're the ones who damaged our gas line. They tried to hurt my family before you ever came here. You saved us, Marcus, and now we're going to help you." Thomas nodded in agreement. "Besides, there's something bigger happening here. Why would anyone go to these lengths over a 12-year-old boy?" Later that afternoon, Aisha sat with Marcus in the guest room, helping him eat soup since he couldn't hold the spoon himself. The intimacy of being fed like a small child clearly embarrassed him, but hunger won out over pride. "My mom used to make chicken soup when I was sick," he said quietly between spoonfuls. "She said it could cure anything." Aisha smiled gently. "My mom said the same thing. Mothers often do." "I miss her," Marcus admitted, his voice breaking. "Both of them. My dad used to read engineering textbooks to me instead of bedtime stories. Mom said it would make me the youngest MIT graduate in history." "They were engineers?" Aisha asked, carefully keeping her tone casual. Marcus nodded. "Chemical engineers, they had their own lab in our garage. They were working on something important, something they said could change everything." His eyes grew distant. "They started getting really nervous a few weeks before the explosion. Dad kept all his notes locked up. Mom made me memorize phone numbers and addresses just in case." Aisha exchanged a look with David, who stood in the doorway. The pieces were starting to fit together. "Marcus," David said gently, "do you think what happened to your family wasn't an accident?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "I heard them arguing. Dad wanted to publish their research, but Mom said it was too dangerous, that they would try to stop them." He looked up, his young face heavy with understanding beyond his years. "I think someone killed them for what they knew." As night fell, Aisha tucked Marcus into bed, promising that the security team Thomas had hired would keep watch through the night. But as she turned to leave, Marcus's voice stopped her. "There's something else," he said hesitantly. "My dad hid something before it happened. He put it inside my old stuffed animal, the one I've had since I was a baby. It was in my room at Westview." Aisha's heart sank. "The fire." Marcus nodded slowly. "If they started it to destroy my records, they probably destroyed everything else too." While Marcus slept fitfully downstairs, the adults gathered in the kitchen to piece together what they knew. Thomas had been making calls all day, gathering information about the Johnsons through his legal contacts. "They were respected in their field," he reported, "published extensively on alternative energy. Their last patent filing was withdrawn mysteriously 6 months ago." "So, whatever they were working on," David theorized, "it was valuable enough to kill for. And dangerous enough for someone to try eliminating all traces of Marcus's existence," Aisha added grimly. The conversation halted abruptly when Zoe appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Mom, Dad, there's a car outside. It's been parked across the street for hours and someone's watching our house with binoculars." As Aisha moved to the window to peek through the curtains, her phone chimed with an incoming text. The message contained only 5 words. "Tonight, last chance, the boy." When Aisha, her heart racing, rushed to check on Marcus in the guest bedroom, she found him sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, listening to sounds that no one else could hear. "Someone's trying to get in," he whispered, his bandaged hands trembling. "I can feel it." Marcus's whispered warning sent a chill through Aisha's body. She quickly moved to the window, carefully peering through a narrow gap in the curtains. The darkness outside revealed nothing immediately suspicious, but years of raising twins had taught her to trust a child's instincts. "How do you know?" she asked, keeping her voice low as she returned to Marcus's bedside. "I can feel the air pressure changing," he explained, his eyes darting toward the door. "Someone's opening a window or door they shouldn't be." Aisha didn't hesitate. She pressed the security alert button on her phone, a direct line to Thomas's security team positioned around the property, and then hit David's number on speed dial. "Marcus says someone's inside," she whispered when he answered. "Lower level, I think." The sound of breaking glass confirmed Marcus's suspicion, followed by the muffled thud of footsteps below. David appeared in the doorway seconds later, a baseball bat gripped in his hands. "Security team is moving in," he said quietly. "Thomas is downstairs. We need to get the kids to the safe room." Aisha helped Marcus out of bed, careful not to touch his bandaged hands. "Can you walk?" He nodded grimly, determination replacing fear on his young face. "I can run if I have to." In the hallway, they met Zoe and Zach, both pale but eerily calm. The twins had been drilled on emergency procedures since they were old enough to walk, a precaution Thomas had insisted upon when David's environmental law practice began targeting powerful corporations. "Follow, Mom," David instructed, positioning himself at the top of the stairs. "No matter what you hear, don't come out until someone gives the password." Aisha guided the children toward the master bedroom, where a walk-in closet concealed a reinforced panic room disguised behind a panel of hanging clothes. As they moved down the hallway, they could hear voices downstairs, Thomas's commanding tone countered by unfamiliar male voices. "Who are they?" Zoe whispered, clutching her brother's hand. "Bad people," Marcus answered simply, his voice steady despite the tremor in his limbs. They were watching for when the security guards changed positions. The sounds of a struggle erupted below, the crash of furniture, a shout of pain, the thud of bodies against walls. David's footsteps pounded down the stairs to join the fray. In the master bedroom, Aisha hurriedly pushed aside hanging clothes to reveal the panic room entrance. She punched a code into a hidden keypad, and a section of the wall slid open silently. "Inside, quickly," she urged, ushering the children through the narrow opening. The panic room was small but efficiently designed, reinforced walls, communications equipment, emergency supplies, and a bank of monitors showing security camera feeds from around the house. Aisha activated the system as soon as the door sealed behind them, bringing the screens to life. The monitors revealed chaos in the living room. Two masked men were engaged in a violent struggle with Thomas and David. One intruder had Thomas pinned against a bookcase, while David swung the baseball bat at the second man, who dodged with unexpected agility. Neither of the Petersons were professional fighters, but they were holding their own through sheer determination. "Mom," Zach pointed to another screen showing the kitchen. "There's someone else." A third intruder was methodically searching through drawers and cabinets, his movements precise and purposeful. Unlike his companions, he wore no mask, revealing a face Marcus recognized immediately. "That's him," he gasped, pointing at the screen. "The man from the police station bulletin board. He works for Enertech Industries. I saw him once when my parents took me to their office building." Aisha activated the silent alarm that would alert both her security team and the police, while keeping her eyes fixed on the monitors. On screen, Thomas managed to break free, landing a solid punch that sent his attacker stumbling backward. David had gained the upper hand as well, cornering his opponent with the bat. Just as the tide seemed to turn in their favor, the third man, the one Marcus had identified, pulled something from his pocket and shouted to his companions. All three intruders immediately began retreating toward the back door, moving with the coordinated precision of professionals. "They're leaving," Zoe observed, her face pressed close to the monitor. "But why?" Aisha wondered aloud, watching as the men disappeared into the darkness of the backyard. What were they looking for? In the distance, sirens wailed, growing steadily louder as police responded to the silent alarm. The security team, having secured the perimeter, entered the house to assist Thomas and David. 20 minutes later, when the password was finally spoken through the panic room intercom, Aisha released the electronic lock. The children spilled out to find David waiting, a nasty bruise forming on his cheekbone, but otherwise unharmed. "Everyone okay?" he asked, gathering the twins into a tight embrace. Marcus hung back, the weight of guilt evident in his posture. "This is because of me. They came for me." "No," David said firmly, extending an arm to include him in the family circle. "They came for whatever your parents discovered. You're just caught in the middle." Downstairs, the living room had been transformed into an impromptu command center. Police officers documented the break-in while Thomas spoke intently with the head of his security team. When Iwi saw Aisha and the children, he broke off his conversation to approach them. "They knew exactly what they were doing," he reported grimly. "Professional job. They disabled 2 of the security cameras before entering." "Did they take anything?" Aisha asked. Thomas shook his head. "Not that we can tell. It seems more like they were searching for something specific." One of the police officers, a younger man with alert eyes, approached with a tablet. "Mr. Peterson, we've got a partial facial recognition match from your security footage. The unmasked suspect matches an employee ID from Enertech Industries, a security consultant named James Foster." Marcus's eyes widened. "That's the same company my parents consulted for. They had meetings there all the time before." His voice trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. Thomas and David exchanged meaningful glances. The connection was becoming clearer and more disturbing. "Officer," Thomas asked, "can you run a background check on this Foster character?" "Already in progress, sir," the officer replied. "Preliminary results show military background, private security work, then Enertech for the past 3 years." As the night progressed into early morning, the police finally departed, promising increased patrols in the area. The security team remained on high alert, with additional personnel stationed around the property. Inside, none of the Petersons felt much like sleeping. In the kitchen, Aisha prepared hot chocolate for everyone, a comfort ritual from her own childhood that she'd passed on to her children. Marcus sat at the counter, watching her movements with tired eyes. "I recognized his watch, too," he said suddenly, breaking the contemplative silence. "The man from Enertech. It was one of those expensive ones with all the dials. My dad said only executives got them. It was like a status symbol at the company." David looked up from his laptop where he'd been researching Enertech Industries. "An executive level, security consultant? That's unusual." "Unless security is their primary business," Thomas suggested darkly. The following morning, exhaustion hung heavy over the household despite the bright sunshine streaming through the windows. The children had finally fallen asleep just before dawn, with Zoe and Zach insisting that Marcus stay in their room where they could protect him better. David sat at the dining table, coffee growing cold beside him as he scrolled through news reports on his tablet. "Listen to this," he called to Aisha, who was making breakfast. "Enertech Industries announces breakthrough in sustainable energy storage, dated 3 months ago, right after the Johnson's lab explosion." "Let me see that," Thomas said, reading over his shoulder. "The technology described here sounds remarkably similar to what Marcus said his parents were working on." A knock at the front door interrupted their discussion. A police officer stood on the porch, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, I'm Officer Chen. We've completed our preliminary investigation of the break-in." He hesitated before continuing. "There's something unusual we'd like to discuss with you." In the living room, Officer Chen spread several photographs on the coffee table. "These are images from traffic cameras near your home last night." He pointed to a black sedan captured at various intersections. "This vehicle was reported stolen yesterday afternoon, but was clearly being used by your intruders." "What's unusual about that?" Aisha asked. "Wouldn't criminals use a stolen car?" "The unusual part," Officer Chen explained, "is that when we found the car abandoned this morning, we discovered this." He placed an evidence bag containing a company ID badge on the table. It belongs to an Enertech executive named James Foster, the same man your security footage identified. David leaned forward, examining the badge. Why would he leave behind something that identifies him so clearly? That's what concerns us, the officer replied. It feels deliberate, almost like someone wanted us to make the connection, Thomas finished. As Officer Chen departed with promises to continue the investigation, a social worker arrived, a tired-looking man with a permanent frown and a briefcase full of documents. I'm Gerald Wilkins from Child Protective Services, he announced without preamble. I'm here regarding Marcus Johnson. The emergency placement with your family was temporary and unauthorized. I have transfer papers to move him to a state facility in Ohio tomorrow morning. That's impossible, Aisha protested. He's recovering from injuries and is a witness in an ongoing investigation. Wilkins remained unmoved. I'm afraid the regulations are clear. Without proper documentation of guardianship, he must be placed in an appropriate state facility. Thomas immediately stepped forward, lawyer mode fully engaged. My client has recently discovered documentation suggesting Aisha Peterson was named as his legal guardian by his parents before their deaths. We'll be filing an emergency petition with the court. Without official records, that claim is meaningless, Wilkins countered. The fire at Westview destroyed all his files, convenient as that might seem. Marcus, who had been listening from the hallway with the twins, stepped into the room, his bandaged hands held slightly in front of him like evidence. You can't send me away, he said, his voice stronger than it had been since they'd met him. They'll find me there too. They want what my parents knew, what I might remember. Wilkins seemed genuinely confused. Who wants what? The same people who damaged our gas line and broke into our home, David explained. The same people who might have killed his parents and destroyed his records. The social worker looked skeptical, but uncomfortable. These are serious allegations. Do you have proof? Before anyone could answer, the telephone rang. David answered, his expression changing from annoyance to concern as he listened. That was Frank, the gas company technician who inspected our line yesterday, he said after hanging up, his face pale. He just finished checking the school bus that picks up kids in our neighborhood. He found another gas leak, same pattern of damage, same signature as our house. When everyone's eyes turned to Marcus, his face displayed a painful mixture of vindication and terror. They'll never stop, will they? He whispered. Not until they get what they want. The news about the sabotaged school bus plunged the room into stunned silence. Frank, the gas technician, had sounded genuinely shaken on the phone, describing identical markings on the fuel line that could have caused a catastrophic explosion during the morning route. David's hand trembled slightly as he set the phone down, the implications washing over everyone present. This proves it wasn't random, Thomas said, breaking the silence. Your family is being specifically targeted. Gerald Wilkins, the social worker, stared at them with a mix of disbelief and growing concern. The bureaucratic certainty he'd displayed moments earlier wavered visibly. Are you suggesting that someone is trying to harm children as part of whatever this is? He asked, his voice lower now. That's exactly what we're saying, Aisha replied, moving protectively toward Marcus. And trying to separate Marcus from us would be playing right into their hands. Wilkins rubbed his forehead, the conflict between protocol and common sense evident in his expression. I need to make some calls, he finally said, stepping into the hallway with his phone. David motioned everyone closer, lowering his voice. Frank is filing an official report, but he said something else disturbing. The bus wasn't on its regular maintenance schedule. Someone specifically requested an inspection today. Who? Thomas asked. A woman claiming to be from the school district, David replied. But when Frank called to confirm, the district had no record of the request. Marcus's face had gone pale. They knew, he whispered. They knew Zoe and Zach would be on that bus this morning. Zoe and Zach, who had been hovering nervously at the edge of the conversation, exchanged frightened glances. The abstract danger that had invaded their home suddenly became terrifyingly personal. "But how could they know our bus route?" Zach asked, his voice small. Thomas's expression darkened. "The same way they knew to put a listening device in your kitchen. Someone's been watching you very closely." The doorbell rang, causing everyone to tense. On the security monitor, they could see Dr. Rivera standing on the porch, medical bag in hand. Aisha let her in quickly, relief evident in her greeting. "I came as soon as I could," Dr. Rivera said, taking in the crowd of worried faces. "I have the results from Marcus's hand scans." In the guest bedroom, Dr. Rivera carefully removed Marcus's bandages while explaining her findings. "The damage is more extensive than I initially thought," she said, gently examining the raw flesh. "Without surgery in the next 2 weeks, he risks permanent contracture of the tendons." "What does that mean exactly?" Aisha asked, her medical training temporarily overshadowed by her emotional investment. "It means," Dr. Rivera said, meeting Marcus's eyes directly, "you could lose the ability to fully open or close your fingers. The scar tissue will essentially freeze your hands in position." Marcus stared at his exposed wounds, watching as Dr. Rivera applied a cooling antimicrobial gel. "Will I ever be normal again?" he asked quietly. Dr. Rivera's answer was honest but kind. "Your hands will always bear scars, but with proper surgical intervention and therapy, you should regain most functionality. Time is critical, though." While Dr. Rivera continued her treatment, Thomas retreated to the dining room with his laptop and a stack of documents he'd brought from his office. He'd been researching Enertech Industries since dawn, pulling records from his legal database and calling in favors from colleagues. "This goes deep," he told David when he joined him. "Enertech has acquired 3 energy startups in the past year. In each case, the founders developed promising alternative energy technologies, sold to Enertech, then mysteriously stepped away from their research." David examined the documents Thomas had spread across the table. "And the Johnsons?" "They never sold," Thomas replied grimly. "According to what I could piece together, Elizabeth and Richard Johnson were consultants for Enertech, but retained ownership of their research. They filed a provisional patent application for something called nanocatalytic energy storage about 8 months ago." "That sounds important," David remarked. "Important enough that their application was flagged for national security review," Thomas said, pointing to a notation on one document. "And then mysteriously withdrawn 3 weeks before their deaths." In the kitchen, Zoe carefully arranged a collection of colorful mineral specimens on a tray. "These are my favorites," she explained to Marcus, who sat at the counter with his freshly bandaged hands. "The blue one is azurite, and this shiny gold one is pyrite." Marcus leaned forward, examining the specimens with genuine interest. "My dad collected rocks too," he said, a small smile flickering across his face. He said understanding minerals was the first step to understanding energy. Zoe beamed, delighted to find a connection. "Do you want to see my microscope? You can look at the crystal structures." Across the room, Zach stood by the window, vigilantly monitoring the street. "There's a car that keeps driving by," he reported suddenly. "Third time in the last hour." David immediately moved to the window, careful to stay partly hidden behind the curtain. Sure enough, a dark sedan rolled slowly past their house, the driver clearly studying their property. "Thomas," David called, "we've got company again." Thomas joined them, his expression grim as he tracked the vehicle. "They're getting bolder. This is harassment now." As the day progressed, Marcus began to remember more details about his parents' work, triggered by Zoe's rock collection and Zach's questions about energy science. They were creating a new way to store energy, he explained as they sat in the twins' bedroom, surrounded by science books and mineral samples. Mom said it could make batteries 1,000 times more efficient and last basically forever. That would change everything, Zach said, eyes wide. No more charging phones. Electric cars that never stop. Renewable energy could finally replace fossil fuels completely. Marcus nodded. That's what Dad always said. A sudden flash of memory made Marcus gasp. The stuffed animal. I remember more about it now. It was a chemistry bear. Had molecules embroidered on its chest. Dad put something inside it the night before. His voice faltered. Zoe exchanged looks with her brother. What did the bear look like exactly? It was brown, about this big. Marcus indicated with his elbows, avoiding moving his fingers. Had goggle eyes and a lab coat. My mom made it when I was a baby. We could check if it's still at the shelter, Zoe suggested. Maybe it survived the fire. Downstairs, Aisha was reviewing the surveillance footage from the previous night, looking for anything they might have missed. She froze the image when Richard Whitmore appeared at the edge of one frame, standing beneath a streetlight, clearly watching their house. David, she called, unable to mask the betrayal in her voice. You need to see this. The footage continued, showing Whitmore taking photographs of their home before dawn, then walking to the corner where a black sedan, the same one currently circling their neighborhood, waited. He handed something to the driver before returning to his own house. He's working with them, David said, anger replacing his usual calm demeanor. Our neighbor of 5 years has been spying on us. Thomas immediately moved toward the front door. I'm going to have a word with Mr. Whitmore. Wait, David cautioned, placing a hand on his brother-in-law's arm. If we confront him directly, we lose any advantage we have. He doesn't know we've spotted him. Reluctantly, Thomas agreed. You're right. We need to be strategic about this. While the adults developed a plan to deal with Whitmore, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a pencil gripped awkwardly in his mouth, attempting to draw diagrams of what he remembered from his parents' research. Despite the pain and limited mobility, he managed to sketch basic molecular structures and energy flow pathways. This is incredible, Thomas remarked, examining the drawings. These look like advanced energy transfer mechanisms. And you learned this just by watching your parents? Marcus nodded. They explained everything to me, said I needed to understand in case. He paused, swallowing hard. In case they couldn't finish their work themselves. By afternoon, Aisha had been researching Enertech Industries on her laptop, her medical background allowing her to understand the scientific papers published by the company and its competitors. Look at this, she said, turning the screen toward the others. Enertech has acquired 3 sustainable energy startups in the past year. In each case, the founders mysteriously stepped away from their research shortly after the acquisition. Stepped away or were pushed? David wondered aloud. The timing is suspicious, Thomas agreed, especially considering what happened to the Johnsons when they refused to sell. As evening approached, Zach discovered a small electronic device taped beneath the kitchen table, a listening bug that had escaped their earlier sweep of the house. Everyone immediately fell silent, exchanging alarmed glances. Thomas grabbed a notepad and wrote, "Don't speak, they're listening." He then wrote a series of instructions for everyone to follow. For the next hour, the family communicated only through written notes, developing a plan to counter whoever was monitoring them. Marcus contributed by writing down everything he could remember about his parents' research and the events leading up to the explosion. On one notepad, he wrote, "Dad hid backup copy somewhere safe. Said if anything happened, I should find Aunt Ellie. But I don't know who that is." Aisha's eyes widened as she read the note. She quickly scribbled on her own pad, "Eliana, was your mother's name Elizabeth Johnson?" Marcus nodded, his expression quizzical. Thomas wrote, "Eliana is Aisha's maiden name. Could be coincidence." The twins exchanged excited glances, sensing a breakthrough. Zoe wrote, "Check Mom's old photos from college." Aisha hurried to the attic, returning minutes later with a dusty box labeled University Memories. With trembling hands, she began sorting through old photographs, postcards, and mementos from her college years. Near the bottom of the box, she found a faded photograph that made her gasp audibly, despite their silent protocol. In the image, a much younger Aisha stood arm in arm with another young woman at what appeared to be a campus party. The woman's features, though younger and carefree, were unmistakably similar to the ID photo of Elizabeth Johnson they had found online. Aisha turned the photograph over. Written on the back in faded blue ink was a message, "To our guardian, if anything happens." When Aisha, stunned, searched through her box of college mementos, she found a photo she'd never truly noticed before, a yellowed image of herself, much younger, standing beside Marcus's parents at a university party, all smiling, and handwritten on the back a message, "For our guardian if something happens." Aisha's hand trembled as she stared at the photograph, the faded message on the back blurring slightly as tears welled in her eyes. "Elizabeth Johnson," she whispered, momentarily forgetting their silent protocol. She traced her finger across the face of the smiling young woman beside her younger self. "We were roommates freshman year, best friends throughout college." Marcus moved closer, his bandaged hands hovering helplessly as he tried to get a better look at the photo. His eyes widened with recognition. "That's my mom," he confirmed, his voice breaking slightly. "You really knew her?" Thomas immediately crossed the room, turning on multiple faucets and the television to create background noise that might confuse any listening devices. "We can talk," he said quietly, "but keep it down and be vague about specifics." Aisha nodded, still clutching the photograph. "Elizabeth and I were inseparable in college. We were both chemistry majors. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant." Her voice trailed off as memories flooded back. "After graduation, we promised to stay in touch, but you know how it is. Careers, relationships, life got in the way. We sent birthday cards for a few years, then Christmas cards, then nothing." "You never mentioned her," David said, placing a supportive hand on his wife's shoulder. "It was painful," Aisha admitted. "She was my closest friend, and I let the friendship fade away. I always meant to reconnect, but then we had the twins, and my practice took off." She looked at Marcus with dawning realization. "I never even knew she had a son." Marcus swallowed hard. "She had a photo of you on her desk. I asked about it once, and she said you were someone very special from her past. She never said your name, though." Driven by a sudden urgency, Aisha began digging deeper into the box of mementos, pulling out envelopes of old letters and cards, all signed by Elizabeth. "There might be more clues here," she said, spreading the correspondence across the dining table. Thomas worked methodically through the pile, his legal training helping him scan for relevant information. "Look at this," he said, holding up a Christmas card postmarked 5 years earlier. Elizabeth mentions Richard's new research breakthrough. She says they've found the key to the energy puzzle, but can't write more in a card. While Aisha continued searching through her memories, David received a call from Dr. Rivera. "The hospital lab analyzed the photos I took of Marcus's hands," she reported. "The infection is spreading faster than we anticipated. He needs surgical intervention within 48 hours, or the damage could become permanent." David's face grew grave as he relayed the information to the others. "We need to get him to the hospital tomorrow, no matter what." Marcus, overhearing this, looked down at his bandaged hands with renewed fear. "Will I lose my fingers?" he asked quietly. "Not if we act quickly," Aisha assured him, immediately shifting into doctor mode. "We'll make this happen, Marcus, I promise." As evening approached, Aisha discovered something she'd completely overlooked, a sealed envelope addressed to her in Elizabeth's distinctive handwriting, dated just 3 weeks before the explosion that killed the Johnsons. The seal was unbroken. "I never received this," she whispered, turning the envelope over in her hands. "How did it get in my memory box?" "Open it," David urged. With trembling fingers, Aisha carefully broke the seal and removed several handwritten pages. As she read, her expression changed from curiosity to shock. "Elizabeth knew they were in danger," she said, looking up from the letter. "She writes that their research had revealed something revolutionary, a method of energy storage that would make fossil fuels obsolete overnight. But powerful people wanted to control it." Aisha continued reading, her voice growing more strained. "She says they've been receiving threats. Richard wanted to publish their findings immediately, make them public knowledge so no one could suppress them. But Elizabeth was afraid." "What else does she say?" Thomas asked. Aisha turned to the final page, her eyes widening. "She names me as Marcus's guardian if anything should happen to them both. She writes, 'You are the only person we trust completely, Aisha. If the worst occurs, Marcus will need your protection. The documentation is filed with our lawyer, Carlton Holloway.'" Marcus, who had been listening intently, suddenly perked up. "Judge Holloway, that's who my dad said to find if something happened." Thomas stared at the boy in astonishment. "Carlton Holloway? You're certain?" Marcus nodded emphatically. "Dad made me memorize the name. He said Judge Holloway would know what to do." The name had a powerful effect on Thomas. Carlton Holloway was our ethics professor in law school. He's now a federal judge with tremendous influence. He pulled out his phone. "I need to contact him immediately." While Thomas attempted to reach Judge Holloway, Marcus sat with Zoe and Zach in their room, the twins attempting to distract him from his pain with stories and games that didn't require hands. "My mom used to say your mom was the smartest person she ever met," Marcus told them, the connection to Aisha providing a strange comfort. "She said they once built a solar-powered alarm clock that woke up their entire dorm building." Zoe grinned. "That sounds like something Mom would do. She helps with all our science projects." "She'll help you get better, too," Zach added confidently. "And Dad and Uncle Thomas will figure out who the bad guys are." Downstairs, Thomas paced the kitchen, growing increasingly frustrated with each failed attempt to reach Judge Holloway. "His clerk says he's in closed sessions all day. I've left 3 messages explaining it's an emergency." "What about the guardianship documents?" David asked. "If they were filed legally, there must be records somewhere." "That's the problem," Thomas replied. "Without knowing which lawyer or court they used, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, and the fire at Westview destroyed any copies Marcus might have had." The phone rang, startling everyone. Thomas answered, his face lighting up momentarily before darkening again. "Thank you for returning my call, Your Honor," he said formally, then listened for several minutes. "I understand. Yes, we'll bring everything we have. Thank you, sir." He hung up with a mixed expression. "Judge Holloway will see us, but not until tomorrow afternoon. He's presiding over a high-profile case that can't be interrupted." Later that night, as the household finally settled into an uneasy quiet, Aisha sat at Marcus's bedside, helping him take pain medication. The boy's fever had returned, his forehead warm to her touch. "Did you really not know about me?" Marcus asked suddenly, his voice small in the darkness. "All these years?" Aisha shook her head sadly. "I had no idea Elizabeth had a son. After we lost touch, I tried searching for her online a few times, but—" She paused, realization dawning. "Now that I think about it, I could never find anything about her or Richard. It was like they'd disappeared from public records." "Dad said they had to be careful," Marcus explained. "They couldn't have social media or put their real address on anything. He said some people would do anything to control their research." In the early hours of the morning, David was awakened by a text message from an unknown number. The message contained only an image, a photograph of Marcus entering the Peterson home, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. The timestamp showed it was captured just hours earlier. David immediately woke Thomas, showing him the threatening image. "They're watching us right now," he whispered. "They know exactly what we're doing." Thomas nodded grimly. "We need to move up our timeline. First thing tomorrow, we get Marcus to the hospital for his hands, then straight to Judge Holloway's chambers." The next morning brought fresh challenges. As Aisha prepared to take Marcus to the hospital, she discovered her car had a flat tire. All 4 tires, in fact. Each one slashed precisely enough to look like normal wear to a casual observer. "They're trying to delay us," Thomas said, examining the damage. "I'll have my driver pick us up in the secure vehicle." At the hospital, Dr. Rivera was waiting with a team ready to examine Marcus's hands. As the bandages came off for the final time before surgery, everyone in the room gasped. The infection had spread visibly, angry red lines tracking up from his palms toward his wrists. "We need to operate immediately," Dr. Rivera declared, signaling for a nurse to prepare the surgical suite. "The tissue damage is accelerating." Aisha, drawing on her medical authority, signed the emergency consent forms. "I'm acting as his guardian," she stated firmly when a hospital administrator questioned her authority. "We have documentation being presented to Judge Holloway today." As Marcus was being prepped for surgery, he suddenly grabbed Aisha's sleeve with his elbow. "There's something else," he whispered urgently. "Something I remembered last night. The formula, my parents' breakthrough. They didn't just hide it in my bear." "Where else?" Aisha asked, leaning closer. Marcus's eyes darted to his bandaged hands. "Dad said they put it somewhere no one would think to look. The night before the explosion, they gave me a shot, said it was a vaccine. But later I heard them talking. They said it's under his skin now where no one can find it." When Marcus was sedated for the surgery, he murmured something that made Dr. Rivera pause and look at Aisha with astonishment. He said the complete formula is hidden in the most obvious place, in the scars on his hands themselves. Dr. Rivera stood frozen in place, his surgical gloves half on, as he processed Marcus's sedated words. The boy's head lolled to one side, the anesthesia taking full effect, but his mumbled revelation hung in the air like an electrical charge. "What did he just say?" Dr. Rivera whispered, looking at Aisha with wide eyes. "The formula, it's in his hands," Aisha repeated, her medical mind racing through possibilities. "His father was a chemical engineer. They must have implanted something during his initial burn treatment," Dr. Rivera finished, suddenly understanding. "We need to be extremely careful with this procedure," he signaled to the surgical nurse. "I want high-resolution imagery of every layer as we work. Nothing gets discarded." Aisha squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently before stepping back. "Save his hands, Elena. Whatever's hidden there can wait." In the surgical waiting room, David paced restlessly while Thomas worked his phone, coordinating their upcoming meeting with Judge Holloway. The twins sat huddled together with a tablet, researching other accidents that had occurred in Oakwood Hills over the past year. "Dad," Zoe called, waving him over, "we found something weird." David knelt beside his children, examining the crude map they had created on the tablet. Red dots marked houses throughout the neighborhood where various accidents had occurred: gas leaks, electrical fires, carbon monoxide incidents. "These aren't random," Zach explained, his finger tracing a pattern. "Every single house has someone working in green technology or alternative energy." David studied the map more closely, recognizing several names. Dr. Wilson, solar panel engineering; the Ahmads, battery technology; the Garcias, hydrogen fuel cells. His blood ran cold as he recognized the pattern. "They're targeting everyone in the neighborhood connected to renewable energy research." "Exactly," Zoe exclaimed. And look at the dates. The incident started 8 months ago, right after Marcus's parents filed their patent application. Thomas joined them, his expression grim as he examined their findings. Someone sending a message to the entire scientific community in Oakwood Hills. Abandon alternative energy research or face the consequences. The surgical doors swung open, and Dr. Rivera emerged, still wearing his scrub cap. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but cautiously optimistic. "We've removed the infected tissue and repaired what we could of the damaged tendons," he reported. "But we found something extraordinary." He lowered his voice, glancing around to ensure privacy. There were microfilms embedded beneath the scar tissue, deliberately placed there, using the burn wounds as cover. "Microfilms?" David repeated incredulously. Dr. Rivera nodded. "Incredibly thin, nearly transparent. They would have been undetectable on standard X-rays. I've secured them in a medical specimen container registered only to Aisha. Officially, they're tissue samples for pathology." "Can Marcus still use his hands?" Zoe asked, her young face pinched with worry. "With therapy and time, yes," Dr. Rivera assured her. "The damage was extensive but not irreparable. We were just in time." While Marcus recovered in post-op, Thomas received a text from his assistant at the law firm. The message chilled him. "2 men claiming to be from the Department of Energy are searching your office. Security holding them at reception." "They're moving faster than we anticipated," Thomas muttered, showing the message to David. "We need to get to Judge Holloway now, before they find a way to block us." Aisha emerged from the recovery room, her face tense. "Marcus is stable but sedated. The hospital administrator tried to stop the procedure, claiming insurance authorization issues. Elena had to invoke emergency medical necessity. Someone's trying to prevent his treatment," David concluded. "We need to split up. Aisha, you stay with Marcus. The twins should remain here too. They'll be safer in a public place with security. Thomas and I will go to Judge Holloway with the evidence we have so far." In the hospital parking garage, Thomas and David moved swiftly toward the secure vehicle, constantly scanning for surveillance. As they reached the car, David's phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Mr. Peterson," a smooth female voice began when he answered. "This is Catherine Wells, Chief Legal Counsel for Enertech Industries. I understand you've been making inquiries about our company." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Ms. Wells, I have no comment at this time." "Before you continue down this path," Wells continued as though he hadn't spoken, "I should inform you that the research you're investigating falls under national security provisions. Attempting to access or distribute such information without proper clearance is a federal offense." "Is that a threat?" David asked, putting the call on speaker so Thomas could hear. "Merely a statement of fact," Wells replied coolly. "Enertech would prefer to resolve this situation amicably. We have no quarrel with your family. Our interest lies solely in protecting proprietary technology that has significant national security implications." Thomas leaned toward the phone. "If that's true, perhaps you could explain why Enertech employees broke into the Petersons' home, or why someone tampered with their gas line, or the school bus that carries their children." A brief silence followed before Wells responded, her tone noticeably harder. "Those are serious allegations, Mr. Reynolds. I suggest you bring any evidence of such claims to the proper authorities, rather than making potentially libelous statements." "That's exactly where we're headed," David replied before ending the call. He turned to Thomas. "They know we're on the move." "Then we'd better hurry," Thomas said, sliding into the driver's seat. At the hospital, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain medication creating a dreamy haze. Zoe and Zach had been allowed into his recovery room under Aisha's supervision, and they sat beside his bed, maintaining a quiet vigil. "Your hands look better already," Zoe offered encouragingly, noting the fresh white bandages that replaced the blood-soaked ones. Marcus managed a weak smile. They feel lighter. Dr. Rivera said they found something in your hands, Zach whispered, leaning closer. Something your parents hid there. Marcus nodded slowly, the memory surfacing through the fog of medication. Dad said it was the safest place. No one would look for valuable data in damaged tissue. His eyelids grew heavy again. Can't steal what they can't see. Aisha's phone vibrated with a text from David. Meeting with Holloway in 30 minutes. Wells from Enertech called. They know. In the grand marble hallway of the federal courthouse, Thomas and David hurried toward Judge Holloway's chambers, carrying a leather portfolio containing the evidence they had gathered. The letter from Elizabeth Johnson naming Aisha as Marcus's guardian. Photographs of the damaged gas lines, security footage from their home, and Dr. Rivera's preliminary report on the microfilms found in Marcus's hands. Mr. Reynolds, a stern voice called out. Thomas turned to see Catherine Wells striding toward them, flanked by two men in dark suits. Her tailored outfit and confident demeanor exuded corporate power. I was hoping to speak with you before your meeting with Judge Holloway. We have nothing to discuss, Ms. Wells, Thomas replied, continuing toward the judge's chambers. I think you'll find we do, Wells persisted, matching their pace. Judge Holloway has already been briefed on the national security implications of this case. Thomas stopped abruptly, turning to face her. By whom? The Department of Energy? The same people who've been threatening a 12-year-old boy? Wells's expression remained impassive. The Johnson research is classified, Mr. Reynolds. It's not a matter for family court. The custody of a minor whose parents were murdered certainly is, Thomas countered. Wells's eyebrow arched slightly. Murdered? The official report indicates an accidental gas explosion, similar to the one that nearly occurred at your sister's home. Unfortunate coincidences do happen. Before Thomas could respond, the door to Judge Holloway's chambers opened, revealing a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes. Carlton Holloway had been a formidable ethics professor before his appointment to the federal bench, and his reputation for integrity was unassailable. Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Peterson, he greeted them formally before his gaze shifted to Wells. Ms. Wells, I wasn't aware Enertech had been notified of this meeting. We have an interest in certain proprietary information that may be discussed, Wells replied smoothly. Judge Holloway's expression remained neutral. This is a private meeting regarding the guardianship of a minor. Unless you're claiming standing in that matter, I suggest you wait outside. Wells hesitated, clearly unused to being dismissed. Your Honor, there are national security considerations, which can be addressed through proper channels if they become relevant, Holloway interrupted firmly. Good day, Ms. Wells. Inside the judge's wood-paneled chambers, Holloway gestured for them to sit. You have 5 minutes to explain why you needed an emergency meeting, Thomas. My docket is full. Thomas efficiently laid out their situation, Marcus's appearance at the Peterson home, the attacks that followed, the discovery of Aisha's connection to the Johnsons, and finally, the microfilms found during Marcus's surgery. Judge Holloway listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly concerned. When Thomas finished, the judge remained silent for several moments. I knew Richard and Elizabeth Johnson, he finally said, surprising both men. Brilliant scientists. They consulted on an energy policy case I presided over 2 years ago. He steepled his fingers thoughtfully. They expressed concerns even then about certain commercial interests attempting to suppress their research. Then you believe us? David asked. I believe this warrants further investigation, Holloway replied carefully. I'll issue a temporary emergency guardianship order placing the boy with your family until a formal hearing can be arranged. As for these microfilms, he continued, studying the medical report, they need to be secured immediately. If they contain what you suspect, they could be extremely valuable and dangerous. As they left the judge's chambers with the signed emergency order, Catherine Wells waited in the hallway, her expression revealing nothing. Judge Holloway has granted temporary emergency guardianship to the Petersons, Thomas informed her, unable to keep a note of triumph from his voice. Wells smiled thinly. Congratulations. But guardianship doesn't convey ownership of intellectual property. The Johnson research belongs to Enertech under prior agreement. We'll be filing an immediate motion to secure our property. Back at the hospital, Marcus awakened suddenly, his monitors beeping as his heart rate spiked. Something's wrong, he gasped, looking at Aisha with panicked eyes. I can feel it. Aisha moved to his side immediately. What is it? Are you in pain? No, Marcus whispered, his eyes darting to the window. Someone's here. Someone looking for me. When David called to report their success with Judge Holloway, Aisha's relief was palpable, until she glanced toward the hospital room door and saw a man in a maintenance uniform watching them through the small window, speaking urgently into a radio clipped to his shoulder. Aisha's blood ran cold as she registered the man in the maintenance uniform watching them through the door window. His eyes locked with hers for a brief second before he turned away, speaking rapidly into his radio. She immediately pulled the privacy curtain around Marcus's bed and pressed the nurse call button repeatedly. What's happening? Zoe asked, her voice small with fear as she picked up on Aisha's tension. We need to move, Aisha replied, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her system. Zach, go to the nurses' station. Tell them Dr. Peterson needs urgent assistance in room 412. Marcus tried to sit up, wincing as he accidentally placed weight on his freshly bandaged hands. They found me, didn't they? It's going to be okay, Aisha assured him, though she wasn't certain of that at all. She quickly texted David, suspicious person at hospital, need immediate extraction. Within moments, a nurse appeared, responding to the urgent call. Is everything all right, Dr. Peterson? No, Aisha replied firmly. I need to move this patient immediately. I believe someone unauthorized is attempting to access him. Call security, please. The nurse, recognizing both Aisha's professional authority and the genuine alarm in her voice, nodded quickly. I'll arrange a room transfer right away. As hospital security mobilized, Dr. Rivera entered the recovery room, immediately picking up on the tension. What's happening? Enertech, Aisha replied in a hushed tone. They're here. Dr. Rivera's expression hardened with resolve. The specimen container with the microfilms, it's not safe in the hospital lab. They could easily gain access with fake credentials. Where is it now? Aisha asked urgently. Locked in my personal office safe, Dr. Rivera assured her, but we should move it. They'll search there first, if they know what they're looking for. In the operating room, Dr. Rivera had worked with methodical precision, documenting every step of the procedure with both standard medical protocols and additional precautions. As he had carefully debrided the damaged tissue from Marcus's hands, something unusual caught his attention. Thin filaments embedded beneath the scar tissue that didn't belong to human anatomy. Bringing a surgical magnifier into position, he discovered what appeared to be microscopic films, deliberately placed within the burn wounds. Now, as hospital security created a perimeter around Marcus's room, Dr. Rivera retrieved a small medical cooler from his office safe. The microfilms are inside, he explained to Aisha. I've photographed them but haven't attempted to read the content. The resolution is incredibly fine. We'll need specialized equipment. Meanwhile, across town, David and Thomas raced back to the hospital, the emergency guardianship order secured in Thomas's briefcase. The judge's authorization had been broader than they'd hoped, granting them temporary custody of Marcus and explicit protection for any medical specimens or personal effects associated with the minor. Wells wasn't happy, David remarked, checking his phone again for updates from Aisha. She practically radiated fury when Holloway signed that order. She'll be mobilizing Enertech's legal team as we speak, Thomas replied grimly. "We have temporary protection, but they'll file countering motions within hours." David's phone rang. Aisha calling rather than texting, a sign of escalating urgency. "We're moving Marcus to a different room," she reported without preamble. Hospital security identified 3 individuals with falsified credentials attempting to access the surgical ward. One claimed to be from the Department of Health, another from hospital administration. "We're 10 minutes out," David responded. "Judge Holloway granted the emergency order. Where are you moving him?" "Pediatric ICU," Aisha replied. "It has restricted access and security cameras. Elena has the microfilms." As hospital staff prepared to transfer Marcus, the twins stayed close to his bedside, their young faces set with determination that belied their age. Zoe had appointed herself guardian of Marcus's few possessions, carefully packing his clothes and the small items David had brought from home into a hospital-provided bag. "We won't let them get you," Zach promised Marcus, his voice quiet but fierce. Marcus managed a small, pained smile. "You guys are braver than most adults I know." The pediatric ICU provided a temporary haven, its restricted access and vigilant staff creating a buffer against Enertech's agents. Dr. Rivera set up a microscope in a small consultation room adjacent to Marcus's new location, carefully extracting the first microfilm from its protective container. "This is extraordinary," he murmured as he adjusted the focus. "The density of information stored here. I've never seen anything like it." Aisha leaned over his shoulder, her medical training allowing her to appreciate the technical achievement. "They used his injuries as camouflage," she said softly. "No one would look for valuable data in damaged tissue." The microfilm revealed fragments of complex chemical formulas, molecular diagrams, and strings of annotated code that meant little to them without proper context. Dr. Rivera photographed each section meticulously, creating a digital backup of everything they found. When David and Thomas arrived, breathless from running through hospital corridors, they found Aisha and Dr. Rivera huddled over the microscope while hospital security maintained a vigilant presence outside. "We need to get these somewhere secure," Thomas said after examining the microfilms. "A hospital isn't equipped for this kind of situation." "Marcus can't be moved yet," Dr. Rivera objected. "His post-operative condition requires monitoring for at least 24 hours. A commotion outside drew their attention. Raised voices, the flash of official-looking credentials. Through the small window in the door, they could see hospital security engaged in heated discussion with a woman in a tailored suit. "Catherine Wells," Thomas identified grimly. "Enertech works fast." David unfolded the judge's order. "She can't touch Marcus or the microfilms with this in place." "She'll try anyway," Thomas predicted. "Legal niceties haven't stopped them so far." The confrontation moved into the ICU waiting area, where Wells argued forcefully with the hospital's chief administrator. "Those materials were extracted during a medical procedure, performed on a minor, without proper authorization," she insisted. "They belong to Enertech under prior agreement with the Johnson family." "The emergency guardianship order specifically covers any medical specimens," Thomas countered, stepping forward with the document. "Additionally, the microfilms were embedded within the patient's tissue without consent, effectively making them part of his person." Wells's perfectly composed expression flickered with annoyance. "This isn't over, Mr. Reynolds. The national security implications alone will supersede any family court order." "Then get a counter order," Thomas replied evenly. "Until then, you have no authority here." After Wells departed, making barely veiled threats about federal intervention, the group reconvened in Marcus's room. The boy was awake but groggy, his freshly operated hands propped on pillows to minimize pressure. "What did they put in my hands?" he asked, his voice small and tired. Dr. Rivera showed him one of the photographs taken through the microscope. Your parents embedded microfilms containing what appears to be their research data. The burns provided perfect cover. The scarring would have hidden them indefinitely without specialized imaging. Marcus studied the image with surprising comprehension. That's their energy storage formula, he identified. I recognize parts of it from watching them work. While Marcus rested, Zoe approached her mother with a thoughtful expression. Mom, Marcus mentioned a stuffed animal, a chemistry bear with his dad's research hidden inside. What if it survived the fire at the shelter? The suggestion triggered immediate action. With Marcus secure in the hospital under both medical supervision and the judge's protective order, David and Thomas decided to investigate the shelter's remains while Aisha stayed with the children. The fire was 3 days ago, David noted as they drove toward Westview Youth. Shelter. The site might still be accessible. The shelter stood partially intact, its administrative wing reduced to charred beams and ash, while the dormitory section had suffered smoke and water damage, but remained structurally sound. Yellow caution tape surrounded the property, but no security personnel were visible. Official investigation must be completed, Thomas observed, ducking under the tape. Let's move quickly. They navigated carefully through the damaged building, following David's phone map to the dormitory area. Marcus said he was in room 14, David recalled, stepping over fallen debris. Room 14 had suffered substantial water damage from the sprinkler system, but the fire hadn't reached it directly. Personal belongings lay scattered and soaked. Clothing, books, small mementos that defined each child's limited personal space. Look for a teddy bear with science symbols, David directed, searching through a small pile of items near what appeared to be Marcus's assigned bed. Thomas lifted a soaked mattress, revealing several items that had been swept beneath it during the chaotic evacuation. Among them, barely recognizable beneath a layer of soot and water damage, was a small brown teddy bear wearing a tattered white lab coat. This must be it, Thomas said, picking up the sodden toy. Its once cheerful face was now blackened, one googly eye missing, the embroidered molecular structures on its chest barely visible through the grime. When David pressed the bear's middle, he felt something solid inside, not the usual soft stuffing, but something firm and angular. There's definitely something in here, he confirmed, carefully tucking the bear into a plastic evidence bag. Let's get this back to Marcus. At the hospital, Catherine Wells hadn't gone far. From her temporary command center in a nearby coffee shop, she coordinated Enertech's response while waiting for the federal orders that would override Judge Holloway's guardianship ruling. The boy is a minor. The research belonged to his parents, who were under contract with Enertech. She instructed a team of lawyers via conference call. I want motions filed in federal court within the hour, and get me someone from the Energy Department on the phone. Meanwhile, Dr. Rivera continued analyzing the microfilms, his amazement growing with each new section he examined. This isn't just an incremental improvement in energy storage, he told Aisha as they studied the imagery together. If I'm understanding these equations correctly, this could increase battery efficiency by orders of magnitude while eliminating the need for rare earth metals entirely. Revolutionary, Aisha murmured. No wonder someone wants to control it. The surgical nurse entered with the latest test results from Marcus's procedure. Dr. Rivera, the tissue analysis from the burn debridement shows something unusual in the cellular structure. Dr. Rivera examined the results, his eyebrows rising progressively higher. This can't be right. Run it again. We did. Twice, the nurse confirmed. Same results. When David and Thomas returned with the soot-covered bear, they found Aisha and Dr. Rivera in intense discussion over the test results. Marcus was awake, watching them with growing concern. We found it, David announced, holding up the evidence bag containing the bedraggled toy. Marcus's face lit up with recognition, momentarily distracting him from his pain. That's it, my chemistry bear. As David carefully cut open the sodden toy with surgical scissors provided by Dr. Rivera, everyone gathered around the small examination table. Inside the bear's body cavity, protected by a waterproof zip bag, was a small USB drive shaped like a molecule. Dad said it contained everything, Marcus explained, watching them extract the drive. But you need facial recognition to access it. Only my face will unlock it. When David connected the drive to his laptop, a security message appeared on the screen. Facial recognition required. Only Marcus Johnson can access these data. The message on the laptop screen glowed ominously in the dimly lit hospital room. Facial recognition required. Only Marcus Johnson can access these data. Everyone gathered around the small screen, the tension palpable as they contemplated their next move. We need to get Marcus in front of this camera, David said, glancing at the boy who lay propped against pillows, his bandaged hands resting carefully on the bedsheet. Dr. Rivera shook his head with concern. He's just had major surgery. We shouldn't move him unnecessarily. Marcus struggled to sit up straighter, determination evident on his young face despite the pain medication clouding his system. Bring the laptop to me. I can do this. Aisha carefully adjusted Marcus's position while David brought the computer closer, angling the built-in camera toward the boy's face. With a soft beep, the laptop's camera activated, scanning Marcus's features. For a moment nothing happened. Then a progress bar appeared, slowly filling from left to right. It's working, Zoe whispered, her fingers crossed tightly. The progress bar reached completion, followed by a cheerful chime. The screen changed, revealing a meticulously organized file system with folders labeled Research Data, Evidence, and For Marcus. A fourth folder, simply titled Alternative Access, caught Thomas's attention. What's in that one? He asked, pointing to the last folder. Marcus squinted at the screen. I don't know. I've never seen this before. David clicked on the folder, revealing a single text document. Opening it displayed a short message. If facial recognition fails, use Aisha's birthday. Elizabeth said it was a day that changed her life. Aisha's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She remembered all this time. What's your birthday, Mom? Zach asked, watching his mother's emotional reaction with curiosity. April 23rd, she answered softly. We met on my birthday freshman year. There was a chemistry department mixer, and Elizabeth was the only other person who preferred staying in the corner, examining the molecular model display instead of socializing. Thomas made a note of the date. So if we lose access to Marcus for any reason, we have a backup entry point. Smart planning by the Johnsons. David began exploring the research data folder, which contained hundreds of scientific documents, complex formulas, test results, and technical specifications that made little sense to anyone, except perhaps Dr. Rivera, who leaned forward with growing excitement as he scanned the information. This is revolutionary, the doctor murmured. They've developed a storage mechanism using organic compounds that can hold electrical charge at densities we thought were theoretically impossible. Meanwhile, Thomas opened the evidence folder, his legal mind immediately recognizing the significance of its contents. Inside were recorded meetings, emails, and documents detailing Enertech's systematic suppression of renewable energy technologies. Most damning were videos Richard Johnson had secretly recorded of Enertech executives discussing neutralizing competitive research and managing scientists who refused to sell their patents. This is why they were killed, Thomas said grimly, clicking through file after file of incriminating evidence. The Johnsons were gathering proof of corporate conspiracy. The third folder, for Marcus, contained personal messages, videos Elizabeth and Richard had recorded for their son, explaining their research and why it was so important. In the final video, dated just 2 days before the explosion, Elizabeth looked directly into the camera, her face tense with worry but resolute. Marcus, if you're watching this, Something has happened to us. Find Aisha Peterson. She's the only person we trust completely. The formula is safe with you now. They'll never think to look there." She paused, emotion briefly, overwhelming her. "We love you more than anything in this world. What we've discovered could help millions of people. Don't let them bury it." As the video ended, the room fell silent except for Marcus's quiet sniffling. Aisha gently placed her hand on his shoulder, offering wordless comfort. The moment was interrupted by a text message alert on Thomas's phone. His expression darkened as he read it. "Judge Holloway says Enertech has filed an emergency motion claiming national security interests. They're trying to get a federal seizure order for the microfilms and any related research materials." "How much time do we have?" David asked, already starting to copy the drive's contents to multiple secure locations. "The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, but Holloway thinks they might move before then," Thomas replied. "We need to secure this evidence immediately." Aisha looked at Marcus, whose eyelids were growing heavy as the pain medication took stronger effect. "He needs rest. The surgery was extensive." "I have an idea," Dr. Rivera said after a moment of contemplation. "The hospital's pathology lab has secure cold storage with restricted access. I can store the physical microfilms there under a coded patient number. As for the USB drive..." "We make copies," Thomas interjected. "Multiple copies, secured in different locations. If they're going to try to suppress this information, we make that impossible." While David worked on backing up the files, Zoe suddenly gasped, pointing at the laptop screen where he had opened another video from the evidence folder. On screen was a familiar face, Mr. Whitmore, their neighbor, sitting in what appeared to be an Enertech conference room. "That's when the Johnson boy should arrive at the shelter," Whitmore was saying to someone off camera. "The documentation has been altered to place him there instead of with a foster family. We'll have easier access that way." "They've been planning this from the beginning," David murmured, disgusted. They deliberately placed Marcus at Westview after the explosion. As the evening progressed, Marcus fell into an uneasy sleep while the adults continued sifting through the mountain of evidence. The USB drive contained not only the complete formula for the Johnsons' revolutionary energy storage technology, but also detailed records of Enertech's systematic campaign to acquire or destroy competitive research. "They've sabotaged at least 5 other renewable energy breakthroughs in the last 2 years, Thomas noted, compiling a summary of the evidence. "Gas leaks, lab accidents, computer system failures, all made to look like accidents or technical problems." Around midnight, as Aisha dozed in the chair beside Marcus's bed, the boy suddenly awakened with a start. "I just remembered something else," he said, his voice clearer than it had been earlier. "Mom said there's another way to access the formula, without the microfilms or the USB drive." David leaned forward. "What is it, Marcus?" "She made me memorize a poem," he explained. "Said if I ever needed to recreate their work, the poem contained the key sequence for the catalyst activation." He closed his eyes, concentrating hard. "It starts, 'Silver moonlight on water shields the truth beneath waves.'" Thomas quickly transcribed every word as Marcus recited the seemingly innocent poem from memory. Dr. Rivera, listening intently, suddenly straightened. "Wait, that's not just poetry. Those are chemical processes described in metaphorical language." "Elizabeth was brilliant that way," Aisha said softly. "She once encoded an entire semester's worth of organic chemistry reactions into a children's story to help me pass finals." By morning, they had extracted enough information from the USB drive to understand the true magnitude of the Johnsons' discovery. The energy storage technology wasn't just incrementally better than existing solutions. It represented a paradigm shift that could make renewable energy practical and affordable worldwide, potentially ending dependence on fossil fuels within a decade. "No wonder Enertech wants to control this," David said, rubbing his tired eyes. It would disrupt their entire business model. Aisha's phone rang, the hospital's front desk. Dr. Peterson, there's a Mr. Wilkins from Child Protective Services here. He says he has updated transfer orders for Marcus Johnson signed by a federal judge. The social worker's unexpected return sent a wave of panic through the group. Thomas immediately called Judge Holloway, stepping into the hallway for privacy. "Stall him," Aisha instructed the receptionist. "Tell him the patient is undergoing a medical procedure and can't be disturbed." When Thomas returned, his expression was grave. "Holloway says the order is fraudulent. He never rescinded our guardianship, and no other judge has jurisdiction to override it without a hearing." "So Wilkins is working with Enertech too," David concluded. "They're trying to get Marcus out of our custody before the hearing." Dr. Rivera volunteered to confront Wilkins, using his authority as attending physician to challenge the documentation. "I'll tell him the patient can't be moved for medical reasons. That should buy us a few hours." While the doctor dealt with the persistent social worker, Marcus watched the adults with growing anxiety. "They'll never stop, will they?" he asked quietly. "They will when we expose them," Thomas assured him, organizing the evidence into a compelling legal case. "The problem is, we need your facial recognition to access this drive in court, and you can't leave the hospital yet." Marcus thought for a moment, then looked up with unexpected clarity in his eyes. "What about Aisha's birthday? Mom said it would work as a backup." David quickly tested the alternative access method, entering April 23rd in various formats until the system accepted it. "It works. We can access the drive without facial recognition." "That's our way. Forward," Thomas said decisively. "David, you and I will present this evidence at tomorrow's hearing. Aisha stays here with Marcus and the twins. Dr. Rivera can testify by phone about the microfilms if needed." As they finalized their plan, a nurse entered with Marcus's medication. The boy hesitated before taking it, looking at Aisha with uncertainty. "What if they try something while I'm asleep?" "We'll protect you," Zoe promised, her young voice fierce with determination. "Zach and I will take shifts staying awake." The nurse smiled at this declaration, adjusting Marcus's IV as she spoke. "You have quite the protective family, young man." After she left, Marcus's eyelids began to grow heavy almost immediately, much faster than previous doses had affected him. His speech slurred as he tried to warn Aisha, "Something's wrong. Feel too sleepy." Aisha immediately checked the IV bag, her medical training triggering alarm bells. "This isn't the right medication. Call Dr. Rivera now." As Marcus slipped into unconsciousness despite Aisha's frantic efforts to rouse him, the hospital room phone rang. David answered it, his face draining of color as he listened to the voice on the other line. "We have your children's school records, home address, and daily schedules. Last chance to surrender the Johnson research." David's hand clutched the phone so tightly, his knuckles turned white as the threatening voice continued. "You have 1 hour to bring everything you've gathered to the South Hospital entrance. Come alone." "Who is this?" David demanded, but the line went dead. Aisha was already at Marcus's side, checking his vital signs with practiced precision. "His breathing is steady, but they've given him something to keep him unconscious. We need to get a blood sample to identify it." "They drugged him?" Zoe asked, her voice trembling as she clutched her brother's hand. "And they're threatening all of you now," David said grimly, quickly explaining the phone call to Aisha. "They know the children's schedules, our home address, everything." Thomas immediately pulled out his phone. "I'm calling in reinforcements, private security for everyone, and we need to alert Judge Holloway." Dr. Rivera burst into the room, responding to their urgent call. After a quick assessment of Marcus, he ordered blood tests and a change of IV solutions. "It appears to be a potent sedative, nothing immediately life-threatening, but he'll be unconscious for several hours." "That's exactly what they want," Thomas said, pacing the small room. "They're trying to isolate us, separate us from Marcus and the evidence." Aisha's medical training took over, her voice calm despite the fear evident in her eyes. "We need to move now. David, take the USB drive and go directly to Judge Holloway. Thomas, coordinate security. I'll stay with Marcus and the twins." "No," David countered firmly. "They've threatened our children. We stay together." For several tense minutes they debated strategy until Dr. Rivera offered a solution. "I can arrange a secure transport to move Marcus to Mercy General's high-security wing. It's a trauma center with restricted access, and my former chief of surgery owes me a favor." Thomas nodded approvingly. "That buys us time and changes their expected battleground." Within 30 minutes, a complex plan was in motion. While hospital security created a diversion at the south entrance, where Enertech's operatives would be expecting David to appear, Marcus was carefully loaded into an unmarked medical transport vehicle at the service entrance. Aisha and the twins accompanied him, surrounded by security personnel Thomas had hired. David, carrying decoy materials in a medical cooler, headed in the opposite direction with a security escort. The real USB drive was securely hidden in a specially designed compartment in Thomas's watch, while digital copies had been encrypted and sent to trusted contacts in the legal and scientific communities. 24 hours, Thomas reminded everyone. "We just need to hold them off until the hearing tomorrow morning. Once this evidence is presented in federal court, it becomes public record." The medical transport took a circuitous route to Mercy General Hospital, carefully avoiding main roads where they might be followed. Inside the vehicle, Marcus remained unconscious, his bandaged hands carefully secured to prevent accidental movement. Zoe and Zach sat on either side of him, their young faces set with determination beyond their years. "He saved us," Zach whispered to his sister. "Now it's our turn." At Mercy General, Dr. Rivera's former colleague, Dr. Samantha Weber, had prepared a secure room in the hospital's most restricted area, a wing typically reserved for high-profile patients requiring protection. Security personnel vetted every staff member who would have access to the floor. "No one enters without biometric confirmation," Dr. Weber instructed her team, "and absolutely no visitors without my personal approval." While Marcus was settled into his new room, David and Thomas arrived at the federal courthouse, where Judge Holloway had agreed to meet them despite the late hour. The distinguished judge listened gravely as they presented the evidence they had gathered, his expression darkening with each new revelation. "These allegations against Enertech are extremely serious," Holloway noted, examining the documents spread across his desk. "Corporate espionage, sabotage, possible homicide. This goes far beyond a custody dispute." "That's precisely why they're so desperate to suppress it," Thomas explained. "The Johnson energy storage formula would disrupt the entire fossil fuel industry. Billions of dollars are at stake." Judge Holloway nodded thoughtfully. "I'm advancing the hearing to 8 a.m. tomorrow and expanding its scope. I'm also issuing protective orders for the boy and all evidence related to this case." He fixed them with a stern gaze. "But be prepared. Enertech will bring their most powerful legal team and likely their political connections as well." Back at Mercy General, Aisha sat beside Marcus's bed, monitoring his vital signs while the twins finally succumbed to exhaustion, curled up together on a cot in the corner of the room. The sedative was gradually wearing off, and Marcus had begun to stir slightly, his eyelids fluttering with returning consciousness. When his eyes finally opened, confusion quickly gave way to alarm. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice raspy. "A different hospital," Aisha explained soothingly. "We had to move you. Someone at the other hospital gave you something to keep you asleep." Marcus processed this information with remarkable composure for a 12-year-old. "They're getting more desperate," he observed quietly. "They know you've seen the evidence now." "Yes, and it's compelling," Aisha assured him. "Thomas and David are meeting with Judge Holloway right now. Tomorrow morning, everything comes out in court, Marcus tried to raise his bandaged hands, wincing slightly. "How bad are they? I can feel my fingers now." "That's excellent progress," Aisha said, genuine relief flooding her voice. "Dr. Rivera did wonderful work. You'll need physical therapy, but you should regain most of your dexterity." In the early hours of the morning, while security teams maintained vigilance around both the hospital and the courthouse, Richard Vaughn, CEO of Enertech Industries, arrived in the city via private jet. His sleek corporate helicopter landed on the company's downtown office building shortly after 5 a.m., where Catherine Wells waited with a team of lawyers and executives. "This situation has become unacceptable," Vaughn stated as he strode into the conference room, not bothering with greetings. "How did a 12-year-old boy and a suburban family outmaneuver our entire security operation?" "They had help," Wells replied tersely. "Thomas Reynolds is a highly connected attorney and judge. Holloway appears to have personal knowledge of the Johnsons' research." Vaughn sank into the chair at the head of the table, his precisely tailored suit failing to disguise the tension in his shoulders. "What's our exposure if this reaches court?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. "The hearing is scheduled for 8 a.m., Wells finally said. "We've filed motions to seal the proceedings under national security provisions, but Holloway has already rejected our initial request." Vaughn's expression hardened. "Then we need leverage. What's the status on the boy?" "Our sources indicate he's been moved to Mercy General, but security is tight," responded a man at the far end of the table. James Foster, the same Enertech security consultant whose face Marcus had recognized from the police station bulletin board. "Find a way in," Vaughn ordered. "I want that formula and those microfilms before the hearing begins." As dawn broke over the city, the key players in the unfolding drama prepared for the confrontation ahead. At Mercy General, Marcus insisted on attempting to stand despite Aisha's concerns. "I need to be at that hearing," he declared, wincing as he carefully swung his legs over the side of the bed. "Judge Holloway needs to see me, to see what they did to me." Aisha hesitated, her medical judgment warring with her understanding of the symbolic power of Marcus's presence. "We'll need wheelchair access, and Dr. Rivera will have to approve it." "He will," Marcus said with surprising confidence. "He knows this isn't just about me anymore." At the courthouse, Thomas and David arrived early, accompanied by a security detail. They had spent the night preparing their presentation, organizing the evidence into a compelling narrative that even non-scientists could understand. The Johnson formula wasn't just another incremental technological advance, it was a paradigm shift that could fundamentally alter the global energy landscape. "The gallery will be full," Thomas warned as they entered the imposing building. "Enertech will have their people there, likely some government representatives as well." David nodded, clutching his briefcase containing the printed evidence. "Let them come. The truth doesn't change based on who's watching." Catherine Wells arrived with her legal team precisely 30 minutes before the scheduled hearing, her composed demeanor betraying no hint of the crisis unfolding within Enertech's executive ranks. Richard Vaughn had opted to remain absent, preferring to maintain plausible deniability should the proceedings take a criminal turn. At Mercy General, Dr. Rivera completed his examination of Marcus, reluctantly approving the boy's request to attend the hearing. "His condition is stable enough for a brief court appearance," he confirmed to Aisha, "but he stays in the wheelchair, and we return immediately if he shows any signs of distress." The twins insisted on accompanying them, their young faces solemn with the weight of the day ahead. "We're family now," Zoe declared, adjusting the blanket over Marcus's lap. "We stay together." As they prepared to leave for the courthouse, a hospital security alert sounded. Unauthorized personnel had been detected attempting to access the secure wing. Dr. Weber immediately initiated lockdown procedures, sealing all entrances to the floor. "They're making their final push," Thomas said when Aisha called to inform him of the situation. "We anticipated this. The secondary transport is waiting at the staff exit on sublevel 2. Dr. Weber has the access codes. The courtroom was nearly full when Judge Holloway took the bench precisely at 8 a.m., his stern countenance revealing nothing of his personal thoughts on the case. Catherine Wells and her team occupied the tables to the right, while Thomas and David sat to the left, the empty chair beside them awaiting Aisha's arrival. "Before we begin," Holloway announced, "I want to clarify the expanded scope of today's hearing. What began as a guardianship matter has evolved to include allegations of corporate malfeasance, theft of intellectual property, and potential criminal actions. I will hear all relevant evidence pertaining to these matters." Wells immediately rose to object. "Your Honor, these additional allegations go far beyond the court's family law jurisdiction and involve proprietary technologies with national security implications." Judge Holloway fixed her with a penetrating stare. "Ms. Wells, this court's jurisdiction extends to protecting the interests of the minor involved, including any inheritance or intellectual property that may belong to him. As for national security claims, I've reviewed your sealed filings and find them without merit." Just as Thomas prepared to present their opening arguments, the courtroom doors opened. Marcus entered in a wheelchair pushed by Aisha, the twins walking proudly alongside them. Despite his bandaged hands and evident exhaustion, the boy's expression radiated determination as he made his way to the front of the courtroom. Judge Holloway's features softened momentarily at the sight of the injured child before returning to their professional neutrality. "I see the primary party in this matter has joined us. Mr. Reynolds, you may proceed." Over the next 2 hours, Thomas methodically presented the evidence they had gathered: the microfilms extracted from Marcus's hands, the contents of the USB drive, the documented pattern of sabotage against renewable energy researchers, and finally, the recorded conversations implicating Enertech executives in the systematic suppression of the Johnson technology, while helping the twins mount a system for detecting gas for the school science fair months later. Marcus looked at his scarred hands, no longer symbols of loss, but marks of a journey that had led him to a new family and purpose, continuing his parents' legacy through the science in his blood and now literally in his hands.